Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of No One Could See the Flea by Tricia Gardella, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. One day, Jack and Shank were headed down to Jaden's house. Shank plucked down on the lawn. He scratched behind his ear. What's the matter? Jack rubbed his fingers where Shank had been scratching. Do you have a flea? Jack looked and looked. He couldn't see a flea. Mom has flea powder, Jack said. Wait here. Jack ran back into the house. It wasn't long before Shank was a different color. Let's go, Jack called. Shank rubbed his back in the grass. The fleas must be worse than I thought. Jack looked and looked. He still couldn't see a flea. Jaden came running over. I thought you were coming to my house. Shank has a flea, Jack said. Jaden looked and looked. He couldn't see a flea. What Shank needs is a bath, Jaden said. You're right, Jack agreed. He pulled his little sister's pool onto the lawn. Then he ran into the house for dish soap. Jaden got the hose. They pushed Shank into the fountain of suds. Out Shank popped on the other side. Munch stood on the sidewalk. He was eating a candy bar. What's going on? Shank has a flea, explained Jaden. Munch looked and looked. He couldn't see a flea. Mom says vinegar and water help stop fleas. I'll get some. In no time, Munch was back with a bottle of vinegar and a box of cookies. How much do we use? Jack asked. Munch didn't know. Maybe we should give it to him straight from the bottle this time, Munch said. Munch offered Shank the bottle. Shank turned his head. Shank's my dog, Jack said. He'll take it from me. Shank turned his head the other way. We'll hold him, Jaden said. Jaden and Munch wrestled Shank to the ground. Jack put the bottle into Shank's mouth and poured in a little vinegar. Wham, bam, slam. Boys flew in every direction. Shank jumped to his feet. Then he plopped down onto the lawn. He rubbed his lips in the grass until they were bright green. Dog problems? Doris was laughing. The boys picked themselves up. Shank has a flea, Munch said through a mouthful of cookies. Doris looked and looked. She couldn't see a flea. Mom says fleas do not like smelly herbs. We do not have any smelly herb, but Mom has some very smelly perfume. I'll be right back. Doris sprinkled the perfume up and down Shank's back. P.U., the boys cried at the same time. Oof, barked Shank. What are you playing? Called Ross. Can I play? We are not playing, said Doris. We are looking for Shank's flea. Ross looked and looked. He couldn't see a flea. You must have got it, he said. Now you need to get rid of his itch. My grandpa says sulfur and lard work the best. We don't have any sulfur, but I have this flea powder. Mom doesn't have lard, but she has shortening, said Ross. We can make it work. This time it took everyone to hold Shank down. As soon as they let go, Shank jumped up and ran around the corner of the house. His coat was now stuck with leaves, twigs, and grass. Here, Shank. Here, Shank, called Jack. I'm sorry, Shank. No more, I promise. Finally, Shank slunk from behind the house. He held his tail tight between his legs. Now what do we do? Asked Jaden. What I should have done in the first place, said Jack. Jack and Shank led the way. Down the block, around the corner, and into the office of Dr. Good marched the parade. What have we here? Asked Dr. Good. Shank has a flea, said Jack. Did anyone see the flea? Asked Dr. Good. Everyone shook their heads. Then why do you think Shank has a flea? Each of them looked at the person next to them. Jack looked at Shank. He scratched, said Jack. Dr. Good looked and looked. He couldn't see a flea. Maybe he had an itch, said Dr. Good. Shank licked Dr. Good on his hand, and then he sat down and scratched behind his ear. The end.